My name is Maya, and I am 26 years old. For the last 3 years, my world has been a small, dark room, illuminated only by the glow of half a dozen monitors. My voice is my only tool, a lifeline I extend into the chaos of other people's worst days. I am a 911 dispatcher. I am the calm in the storm, the steady presence on the other end of the line when everything is falling apart. I've learned that in this job, you are a ghost, a nameless, faceless guide through terror. You hear the final words of some, the first cries of relief from others, and then you vanish, on to the next call, the next crisis. It's a strange, disembodied existence, but it's a purposeful one. It's the life I chose, or perhaps, it's the life that chose me after my old one was burned to the ground, long before any flames were involved. I never imagined that the two worlds would collide. I never thought the voice my own mother would need to hear in her darkest, most desperate moment would be the very one she had once tried so hard to silence forever. Before I tell you how one single, frantic phone call, lasting only 7 minutes, managed to rewrite 3 years of silence and a lifetime of pain. Before I dive into the story of how my greatest rejection became my most profound purpose, I want to ask you something. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and if you've ever felt like you had to build your own family from scratch, if you've ever had to find your own people, because the ones you were given didn't see you, go ahead and hit that like button, because I promise you, you are not alone in that feeling. For all the new viewers out there, my name is Maya, and if you want to be part of a community that understands that sometimes the family you choose is the one that truly saves you, make sure you subscribe, because this story is for you. My childhood home wasn't just a house. It was a stage. Every surface in our sprawling 2-story colonial on Willow Creek Lane was polished to a high gleam. Every piece of furniture was artfully placed, and every window was spotlessly clean, offering a perfect, curated view of our manicured lawn. My father, Richard, was the architect of this perfection, both literally and figuratively. He was a man who built skyscrapers downtown, and expected his family life to be constructed with the same rigid, ambitious blueprints. Everything was about potential, about legacy, about tangible, measurable success. My mother, Eleanor, was the curator of the stage. Her domain was appearance, social standing, and the delicate art of ensuring our family presented an image as flawless as our home. They were a formidable team, a fortress of expectation, and I, from a very young age, was the lone crack in their pristine facade. The accusation that hung over my entire life, the one that eventually led to the final severing blow, was my lack of ambition. It wasn't a single argument, it was the ambient noise of my upbringing, a constant, low hum of disappointment. I remember it starting when I was 8 years old. Our 3rd grade class had a project to create a diorama of our favorite scene from a book. I chose a story about a girl who gets lost in a magical forest. For weeks, I worked tirelessly. I collected moss and twigs from the backyard. I sculpted tiny animals from clay. I used my mother's old jewelry box to create a fairy's cottage, and I painted a backdrop of a deep twilight wood that felt so real, I could almost smell the damp earth. I was prouder of it than anything I had ever made. I presented it to my parents, with my heart thumping with excitement. My father peered at it over the top of his reading glasses, his expression unreadable. "It's intricate, Maya," he said, the word hanging in the air like a judgment. He then turned to the mantelpiece, where my older brother Daniel's latest mathlete trophy stood, gleaming under the track lighting. Daniel was 10, and already on a clear path to greatness in my father's eyes. "See that, Maya," he said, pointing to the trophy. "That's ambition. That's a pathway. It's a tangible result that leads to scholarships, to a good university, to a career. He looked back at my little shoebox forest. This, he sighed, is a hobby. It's pleasant, but it doesn't lead anywhere. My mother, standing beside him, just offered a tight, sympathetic smile and reached out to straighten a framed photo of Daniel, as if my diorama had somehow knocked the whole room off kilter. I felt a hot wave of shame wash over me. My magical forest suddenly looked flimsy and childish. I packed it away that night and never took it out again. The message was clear. What I loved didn't matter unless it could be quantified, ranked, and displayed on the mantelpiece of our family's success. This theme only intensified as I grew older. When I was 15, I found an application to volunteer at the local animal shelter. The idea of spending my Saturdays helping scared, abandoned animals, of doing something simple and kind, filled me with a sense of purpose that was missing from every other part of my life. I brought the form to my parents at the dinner table, my hands sweating. The reaction was swift and decisive. "Absolutely not," my mother said, placing her fork down with a delicate click. "It's dirty work, Maya. It's sentimental, and frankly, it won't look good on a college application for a real career. It shows a lack of focus." My father chimed in, not even looking up from his steak. "Your mother is right. You need to be building a resume, not cleaning cages. We've enrolled you in the debate club. It starts next week." I was horrified. The thought of public speaking, of arguing points I didn't believe in, made my stomach turn. "But I don't want to do debate club," I pleaded. "I want to do this. It feels important to me." My father finally looked at me, his eyes cold. "What feels important to you is not the primary concern. The concern is your future. A future we are carefully planning. Daniel understands this." Of course, Daniel understood. Daniel was pre-law, captain of the debate team, the golden child, whose every decision was met with enthusiastic approval. He was a reflection of them, and I was a frustrating distortion. I was forced into the debate club, where I spent every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, feeling like a ventriloquist's dummy, speaking words that weren't my own, my silence on the inside screaming. I learned to be a good prop, to stand where I was told and say what was expected, but a bitter seed of resentment had been planted. The battleground shifted to my college applications. 2 years later, I had secretly nurtured a dream of studying social work or psychology, the idea of understanding people, of helping them navigate their pain, resonated with the quiet, empathetic part of me that my family had tried so hard to stamp out. I made the mistake of mentioning it during one of our future planning sessions. My father actually laughed. A short, sharp, dismissive sound. "A social worker, a glorified charity worker. We are not paying $250,000 for you to learn how to feel sorry for people, Maya. That's not a return on investment." Eleanor's concern was, as always, about optics. "Think of the people we know, darling. The Hendersons' daughter is at Yale Law, the Clark's son is at Johns Hopkins for medicine, and our daughter wants to be a counselor." She said the word like it was a contagious disease. The ultimatum was laid bare. They would pay for my education, but only if I studied something they deemed worthy. Business, economics, maybe engineering. I fought back, for the first time with real fire. I told them it was my life, my choice. The argument raged for weeks. A cold war of disapproving silences and pointed remarks. In the end, they threatened to cut me off completely. Terrified and exhausted, I compromised. I enrolled in a communications program at a state university. It felt like the ultimate beige flag of surrender, vague enough to be respectable, but utterly devoid of the passion I craved. College was 4 years of going through the motions, of writing papers on marketing strategies and corporate messaging, while my soul felt like it was starving. I was adrift, and the people who were supposed to be my harbor were the ones who had set me out to sea. The final explosive fight happened a year after graduation. At 23, I was living back at home, a condition of their continued tenuous financial support. I was working as a barista at a local coffee shop to save money, a job that my parents spoke of in hushed, mortified tones to their friends. "She's just finding herself," was Eleanor's go-to line, delivered with a pained smile. But secretly, I had found a flicker of that purpose I'd been searching for. On my own dime, I had enrolled in an evening EMT basic certification course at the local community college. I didn't tell them. It was the first thing that was truly mine. The work was demanding, messy, and often heartbreaking, but holding a stranger's hand in the back of an ambulance, providing a small measure of comfort and care in a moment of pure chaos, felt more real and more important than anything I had ever done. It was the opposite of their world. It was unglamorous, uncelebrated, and profoundly human. Of course they found out. A letter from the community college about my certification exam arrived, and my mother, who never respected the sanctity of mail, opened it. That evening, a family dinner was called. It felt less like a meal and more like an arraignment. A glossy brochure for a marketing firm was placed pointedly at my dinner setting. "We need to talk about your future, Maya," my father began, his voice dangerously calm. I took the liberty of speaking with a colleague of mine. "There's an entry-level position open at his firm. It's a real career, a starting point." I just stared at the brochure, at the smiling, soulless faces of the marketing team. "I don't want that," I said quietly. My mother sighed dramatically. "Maya, please, don't be difficult. We found the letter. This ambulance fantasy has to stop. It's beneath you, beneath me." The words struck me like a physical blow. "It's not a fantasy," I said, my voice rising. "It's what I want to do. I'm good at it. I help people." My father slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "Help people. We gave you everything. A top-tier education, a world of opportunity, and you're throwing it all away to what? Serve coffee by day and play ambulance driver by night. You have no ambition, no drive to be better than you are." His voice was laced with a contempt that stole the air from my lungs. Eleanor jumped in, her words a volley of social anxieties. "What will we tell people, Maya? What will we say when the Abernathys ask what our daughter is doing, that she's a service worker? After everything we've invested in you, all the sacrifices we've made, it's humiliating, it's embarrassing for us." And that was it. The thread I had been holding on to for 23 years finally snapped. All the years of being dismissed, molded, and shamed coalesced into a single, blinding moment of clarity. My ambition wasn't their ambition. My worth wasn't tied to their social standing. "My ambition isn't your ambition." The words erupted from me, raw and shaking. "I don't care about a corner office, or a title, or what the Abernathys think. I care about making a difference, a real difference, even if no one ever sees it, even if it doesn't come with a trophy for your mantelpiece." The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. My father's face was a mask of cold fury. He stood up, his tall frame looming over me. "This is not a negotiation, Maya. You will take this job. You will start acting like a daughter of this family. with the gratitude and respect that entails. Or you can find your own way. We will not support this childish rebellion. The ultimatum hung in the air, the final test of loyalty to their vision of my life. I looked from his unforgiving face to my mother's, which was a portrait of panicked disappointment. I saw no love there, only conditions. I saw no support, only expectations, and I knew I was done. I stood up, my own chair scraping loudly against the polished hardwood floor. My whole body was trembling, but my voice, when it came, was steady. Then I guess I'll find my own way. I turned and walked out of the dining room, down the hall, and out the front door, into the cool night air. I didn't take anything with me. I just walked away. I expected a call, a text, anything, but my phone remained silent. The door had closed, and they had locked it behind me. At 23 years old, I was officially, completely, and utterly disowned. The weeks that followed were a blur of terror and grim determination. The reality of being truly on my own was a brutal shock to the system. I had a few $100s saved from my barista job and a beat-up car. I slept on a friend's couch for 2 weeks until I scraped together enough for a deposit on a tiny, grim apartment above a laundromat. The place always smelled of damp clothes and bleach, and the pipes shuddered every time a neighbor flushed a toilet. I took on a second job, waiting tables at a greasy diner. My days and nights a grueling cycle of pouring coffee, bussing tables, studying for my EMT exam, and falling into bed too exhausted to even cry. The loneliness was a physical presence, a constant weight on my chest. There were dozens of moments when I would pick up my phone, my thumb hovering over my mother's contact number. I craved the comfort of her voice, the familiar cadence of my father's complaining, the simple fact of belonging to someone. But then the memory of their cold, disappointed faces would rise up, the word humiliating echoing in my ears, and I would put the phone down. The pain of their rejection was still sharper than the pain of my current reality. I had to prove them wrong, or maybe I just had to prove to myself that I could survive without them. It was in the break room of the diner, slumped over a cup of stale coffee at 3 in the morning, that my life changed direction again. A fellow waitress, a kind, world-weary woman named Maria, was scrolling through job listings on her phone. "You should do this," she said, pushing the phone toward me. "My cousin's husband does it, says it's crazy, but it's steady. Good benefits." I squinted at the screen. 911 Emergency Dispatcher, City of Northwood. The description was brief. Requires calmness under pressure, ability to multitask, excellent communication skills, a voice in the dark. The phrase resonated deep within me. It was everything I had been trying to be in my own quiet way. A calm presence in a crisis. It was the core of my EMT training, but without the physical mess, without the direct confrontation of life and death that still sometimes rattled me. It was a job where my worth would be measured not by my pedigree, but by my performance in the moments that mattered most. On a whim, fueled by caffeine and desperation, I applied right there on Maria's phone. To my astonishment, I got an interview, then a second, and then an offer for a place in the next training academy class. The training was the most grueling experience of my life. A 6-month trial by fire designed to weed out anyone who couldn't handle the pressure. We were inundated with information, a dizzying array of 10 codes, phonetic alphabets, jurisdictional boundaries, and emergency protocols, for everything from a cat in a tree to an active shooter. We spent hours in simulation labs, with instructors screaming scenarios at us, forcing us to dispatch police, fire, and medical services simultaneously, while keeping a frantic role-playing caller on the line. Many of my classmates washed out, their nerves shredded. but I discovered something surprising about myself. In the midst of the simulated chaos, I was preternaturally calm. The childhood I had spent walking on emotional eggshells, learning to read the subtle shifts in my parents' moods and de-escalate their disappointment, had inadvertently trained me for this. I knew how to compartmentalize, how to push down my own fear, and focus entirely on the voice in my headset. I knew how to be the calm in the storm, because I had lived in one for 2 decades. The first time I took a real call, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely type. A woman was screaming that her husband had collapsed, that he wasn't breathing. My training kicked in like muscle memory. I got the address, dispatched paramedics, and then, my voice steadier than I felt, I began to guide her through CPR. "Pay, ma'am. I need you to listen to me." Place one hand on top of the other, in the center of his chest, push hard and fast. 1 and 2, and 3, and 4. I was her metronome, her anchor, until the sirens arrived. I hung up the phone, and felt a wave of adrenaline and profound satisfaction wash over me. I had done it. I had made a difference. No one would ever give me a trophy for it, but in that moment, I felt a sense of pride that dwarfed any academic award Daniel had ever won. But the true salvation of my new life wasn't just the job, it was the people. In the sterile, fluorescent-lit environment of the dispatch center, I found the family I had always craved. My found family was a motley crew of misfits and heroes who understood the strange burden we all carried. There was Javier, a 20-year veteran of the job, who became my unofficial mentor. He was a barrel-chested man, with a perpetually grumpy expression, and a voice like gravel, but his eyes held a deep well of kindness. He saw my potential from day one. During one particularly brutal shift, where I had taken a devastating call involving a child, he found me crying silently in the break room. He just sat down beside me, handed me a lukewarm cup of coffee, and said, "Forget them, kid." I hadn't told him much about my parents, but he just seemed to know. "You've got more purpose in your little finger than they have in their whole damn country club. Don't you ever forget that." He was the father figure I never had, one who valued grit over polish. My shift partner was Chloe, a woman my age with a shock of bright pink hair, and a wit as sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. She was fiercely loyal, and had a seemingly endless supply of bad jokes and black coffee. She was the one who diagnosed my moods from the slump of my shoulders, who knew when to talk and when to just sit in comfortable silence. She brought me soup when I was sick, dragged me out for post-shift breakfasts at a greasy spoon diner at 4 in the morning, and made me laugh on nights when the weight of the calls felt unbearable. She was the sister I'd always wanted, one who saw me, all of me, and didn't flinch. And then there was Brenda, our shift supervisor. She was a stern, no-nonsense woman in her late 50s, who ran our shift with military precision. She was terrifying to the rookies, but once you earned her respect, you realized her tough exterior was armor protecting a fiercely maternal heart. She was protective of her team, advocating for us with the higher-ups and ensuring we had the resources and support we needed. She judged us on one thing, and one thing only: our ability to do the job. She didn't care where we came from, who our parents were, or what kind of car we drove. She cared about competence and compassion. She was the mother figure who didn't need me to be a reflection of her, but a capable version of myself. This was my family. We were bound not by blood, but by shared trauma, gallows humor, and the unspoken understanding of what it meant to be the anonymous voices guiding people through the darkest nights of their lives. With them I slowly began to heal, to rebuild my sense of self, not on the foundation of my parents' expectations, but on the solid ground of my own capabilities and the unwavering support of my chosen family. A year into the job, I faced a call that became a defining moment for me, a sort of final exam for my new identity. The line chirped, and I answered to the terrified sobs of a little boy. He couldn't have been more than 7. He was home alone with his mother, and she had collapsed on the kitchen floor. He was whispering into the phone, hiding in a closet, scared that he had done something wrong. My heart clenched, but my voice came out smooth and even. Over the next 10 minutes, I became his entire world. I coaxed him out of the closet, convinced him he was the bravest boy I had ever spoken to. I had him describe his house to me, piece by piece, until he mentioned a pizza flyer on the fridge, and from that we figured out his address. Then, with a gentleness I didn't know I possessed, I walked him through the steps of checking his mother's breathing, telling him to put his little hand in front of her mouth, to feel for puffs of air. All the while, I was coordinating the response, my fingers a blur on the keyboard. Brenda and Javier had plugged into my call, a silent show of support. I could feel their presence, a safety net I'd never had before. When the paramedics finally arrived, and a gruff, kind voice came on the line to tell me they had taken over, the little boy got back on the phone for one last second. "Thank you for being my friend," he whispered, before the line went dead. I had to step away from my console for a moment. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was something else, something powerful. Brenda followed me into the quiet room. She didn't say much, just put a hand on my shoulder. "You have a gift for this, Maya," she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "This is exactly where you're supposed to be." Her words were simple, but they landed with the force of a revelation. This was the validation I had spent my entire life chasing from my parents, the simple acknowledgement of my worth. But coming from Brenda, from my found family, it meant so much more. It wasn't conditional. It wasn't a measure of my potential for their glory. It was a recognition of who I was, right here, right now. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The desperate need for my parents' approval began to recede, replaced by a quiet, solid sense of self-worth. And so, life went on. 3 years passed since I had walked out of that house on Willow Creek Lane. At 26, I was a seasoned dispatcher, a senior member of the night shift. I had my own small but comfortable apartment, a life filled with the easy camaraderie of my colleagues, and a purpose that sustained me through the long, dark hours. I rarely thought of my parents anymore. The sharp, searing pain of their rejection had faded into a dull, chronic ache, a scar that I had learned to live with. I had built a new life, a new family, a new me, from the ashes of the old one. I thought that chapter was closed forever. I had no idea it was about to be violently ripped open again. It was a Tuesday night in late October. A nasty storm was battering the city, the wind howling, and the rain lashing against the windows of the dispatch center. Nights like this were always chaotic. The power lines were down in several neighborhoods, leading to a Serwin mine, a Lashin Ween. The slick roads meant more car accidents. The callboard was a steady, blinking river of red and yellow lights. The atmosphere in the room was tense, a low hum of controlled urgency. Flashes of lightning would periodically bleach the room white, freezing us all for a split second like figures in a photograph, before plunging us back into the intimate glow of our monitors. I was in the zone, handling a fender bender on the interstate, when a dedicated 911 line began to shriek, an insistent, high-pitched tone, reserved for the most critical emergencies. My line was free. I took a steadying breath and pressed the button. 911, what is your emergency? A voice tore through my headset, a sound I hadn't heard in 3 years, but recognized in the marrow of my bones. It was thin, ragged, and strangled with a terror so profound it was almost animalistic. Fire! Oh God, my house is on fire! Help me, please help me. It was my mother. The sound of her voice, stripped of all its usual poise and condescension, sent a jolt of pure ice through my veins. For a fraction of a second, the world tilted on its axis. The dispatch center, the storm outside, my entire life for the past 3 years, it all dissolved. I was a child again, standing in that cavernous, silent hallway, terrified of making a sound. My hand froze over the keyboard. I couldn't breathe. Ma'am, I need your address. I need you to tell me where you are. My own voice was a stranger's, a calm, automated recording that came from somewhere outside of my paralyzed body. Her response was a series of choked, desperate gasps, punctuated by violent coughing. It's 1284, Willow Creek Lane. The address. The numbers landed in my mind like stones, each one a memory, a ghost. The tire swing on the old oak tree in the front yard. The chipped paint on the third step of the porch. The weight of the heavy oak door. It was a gut punch that knocked all the air out of me. My childhood home was burning down, and my mother was trapped inside. Across the room, I saw Javier's head snap up. He saw the look on my face, the sudden, stark terror. His eyes locked with mine, and in that single steady gaze, he seemed to be willing his own calm into me. You can do this, kid. The thought was as clear as if he had spoken it aloud, and just like that, the professional took over. The years of training, the hundreds of calls, the muscle memory of crisis response slammed into place like a steel door, shutting out the screaming, terrified daughter. There was only the dispatcher now. My fingers, which had been frozen a second before, flew across the keyboard. I entered the codes for a confirmed structure fire, with entrapment, the highest priority call we had. The address and incident type flashed across every screen in the room. I heard Chloe's sharp intake of breath beside me. She and Brenda knew. They knew that address. Without a word, they were in motion, an unspoken ballet of professional instinct. Chloe began dispatching additional units, a second and third engine, a ladder truck, a battalion chief. Brenda cleared the radio channel, ordering all other traffic to hold, dedicating the airwaves to my call. They were building a fortress of support around me, leaving me free to do the only thing that mattered: keep the voice on the other end of the line alive. Okay, ma'am. Help is on the way. I have fire and rescue responding to 1284 Willow Creek Lane, right now. They are coming for you. What is your name? I had to ask. It was protocol. Eleanor, she sobbed. I know. Okay, Eleanor. I'm going to stay on the line with you until they arrive. Where are you in the house? Her words were broken by a terrible racking cough. Upstairs. The master bedroom. The hallway. It's full of smoke. I can see the flames under the door. My mind became a split screen. On one side was the dispatcher, coolly processing information, running through checklists. On the other side was the daughter, picturing the layout of that house, with perfect, agonizing clarity. I knew that hallway. I knew the exact distance from her bedroom door to the top of the stairs. I knew that the master bedroom was at the far end of the house, the furthest point from safety. Eleanor, I need you to get away from that door. Get down on the floor right now. The good air is low to the ground. You have to crawl. The door, she panicked. I tried the door. It's hot. Don't touch the door again, I commanded, my voice sharp but steady. I need you to take a towel, or a blanket, anything you can find, and stuff it in the crack under the door. Can you do that for me? I could hear her scrambling, the sounds of her panicked movements, her ragged breathing, the blankets from the chest, she coughed, the antique cedar chest at the foot of their bed. My father had bought it on a trip to Italy, a trip I wasn't invited on because I'd gotten a C in my economics class that semester. The memory flashed, hot and bitter, and I shoved it brutally back down. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered. But the next instruction, "That's good, Eleanor. Now, is there anyone else in the house with you? Where is your husband?" The slip was horrifying. For a split second, the mask fell, and the daughter spoke. I prayed she hadn't noticed through her panic. "Richard," she cried. "No, he's not here. He had a late dinner meeting with a client." The irony was a dose of pure acid in my throat. My father, the man obsessed with ambition, with climbing the corporate ladder, was out networking, while his perfectly curated world went up in flames, with his wife trapped inside. The sound of the smoke was getting worse, a low, angry roar in the background of the call. Eleanor's coughing was almost constant now, her panic escalating into hysteria. "I can't breathe. Oh God, I'm going to die in here. I can't die." "Eleanor, listen to my voice," I said, pitching my own voice, lower, slower. "My name is Maya. You are not going to die. I am going to stay right here with you. We are going to get you out. Now I need you to crawl to the window, the big one that faces the old oak tree in the front yard. Can you get to that window?" I remembered that window. I remembered climbing out of it, onto the thick branches of that tree, when I was a teenager, just to sit and stare at the stars, to escape the suffocating silence of the house. I knew it was a straight drop to the lawn, but the firefighters could get a ladder there easily. I could hear the first faint wail of sirens in the distance, a thread of hope in the cacophony of her terror. "Do you hear that, Eleanor? That's for you. They're almost there, just a little longer. Stay with me." But she was starting to fade. Her responses were getting weaker, her words slurring. She was being overcome by the smoke. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice a ghost of itself. "Maya, I'm so sorry." My heart stopped. Did she know? Did she somehow recognize my voice through the calm professional cadence? Or was it a deathbed confession? A final apology to the daughter she had cast out, spoken into the void. The thought was a crack in my composure, a fissure through which a tidal wave of grief and love and rage threatened to pour. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the edge of my console until my knuckles were white. "Not now. Hold on." Then through the phone, I heard a new sound, the splintering crash of the front door being forced open, followed by the muffled shouts of men's voices. "They're inside the house, Eleanor." I yelled into the headset, trying to cut through her delirium. "They're coming for you. You have to yell. Make some noise, so they can find you." I heard a faint, strangled cry from her end, and then a much louder sound, the percussive thud of an axe splintering the wood of her bedroom door. A new voice, rough and breathless and amplified by a breathing apparatus, came onto the line. "Dispatch. This is Captain Miller. We have the victim. She's unconscious, but breathing. We're bringing her out now." The line went dead. The roar of the fire was replaced by an absolute, deafening silence in my headset. It was over. I let go of the mouse, but my hand was stuck in a claw-like position, shaking so violently, I couldn't control it. A gasping sob escaped my lips, then another. The steel door of my professionalism shattered, and everything I had been holding back for the last 7 minutes came rushing in. Chloe was at my side in an instant, her warm hand on my back, murmuring soft, comforting words. Javier gently took the headset from my head, his calloused fingers brushing my temple. Brenda stood in front of my console, her face a mask of profound concern, and something else, pride. "Go," she said, her voice firm but kind. "Go now. Javier and I have the board. Go to the hospital." She pressed my car keys into my trembling hand. "She's your mother, Maya. Go." The drive to Northwood General Hospital was a surreal, disjointed nightmare. The storm had finally broken, and the rain was coming down in sheets, the windshield wipers beating a frantic, hypnotic rhythm that matched the frantic thudding of my heart. My mind was a chaotic slideshow of images, the floor plan of my childhood home, the angry orange glow I had pictured under my mother's door, the memory of her voice, thin and terrified, whispering my name. The dispatcher in me was gone, replaced by the terrified daughter, the anger, the years of resentment, the bitter pride that had sustained me. It had all been incinerated in that 7-minute call, burned away by a primal, terrifying fear for my mother's life. I didn't hate her. I didn't want her to be sorry. I just wanted her to be alive. The hospital's emergency room waiting area was a stark, sterile world of white walls and cold, unforgiving fluorescent lights. It was the antithesis of the chaotic, fiery scene I had just managed from miles away. I was standing numbly by the reception desk when the automatic doors hissed open, and my father Richard burst in. He was still in his expensive suit, but his tie was askew, and his usually immaculate silver hair was disheveled. His face, a face I hadn't seen in 3 years, was ashen with a panic I had never seen on him before. He didn't see me. He strode to the desk, his voice a low, demanding growl, as he asked for information about his wife, Eleanor Vance. He was all sharp edges and authority, even in his terror. He turned from the nurse, his face a mask of frustration, and that's when his eyes finally landed on me. His expression cycled through a series of emotions in a matter of seconds. First, pure confusion, then, a flash of irritation, as if my very presence was an inconvenience, and finally, a slow, dawning, bewildered realization. "Maya," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper, "what are you doing here? How did you even know?" I felt a strange, hollow calm settle over me. The storm inside me had passed, leaving behind an eerie quiet. I looked my father in the eye, my gaze steady. "I was the dispatcher," I said, my voice flat, devoid of any emotion. "I took her call." The 3 words hung in the sterile air between us. I took the call. I watched the meaning of that sentence land on him, watched it dismantle the entire structure of the world as he knew it. The look on his face was one of pure, unadulterated shock. It was the face of a man whose rigid, well-ordered universe had just been turned completely upside down. The daughter he had disowned for her lack of ambition, the daughter whose chosen path he had called humiliating, had just become the single most important person in his life. She had been the calm, professional voice that had orchestrated the saving of his wife, his home, his entire world. The irony was so thick, it was suffocating. He looked like he wanted to speak, but no words came out. He just stared, his mouth slightly agape. Just then, a doctor in blue scrubs came through the double doors. "Family of Eleanor Vance?" he asked. Richard stumbled forward, and I followed a step behind. "I'm Dr. Evans," he said kindly. "Your wife has suffered from severe smoke inhalation, and we're monitoring her closely, but her vital signs are stable. She's a very lucky woman. She's going to be okay." A wave of relief so powerful it made my knees weak washed over me. Richard visibly crumbled, leaning against the wall for support, his hand covering his face. He took a few deep, ragged breaths, and when he looked up, his eyes were fixed on me. For the first time in my life, I felt like he was truly seeing me. Not the projection of his disappointments, but me. The condescension was gone, replaced by a raw, bewildered gratitude. "The firefighter, the captain," he stammered, his voice thick. "He spoke to me on the way here. He said Eleanor was asking them to to tell the dispatcher thank you, that the voice kept her alive. That was you. I could only manage a single tight nod, a lump forming in my throat. The thank you relayed secondhand, felt both monumental and strangely hollow. It was the validation I had once thought would fix everything, but now it just felt complicated. After a while, a nurse told us we could see her for a few minutes. I followed my father down the long, quiet corridor to the intensive care unit. Eleanor was lying in the bed, looking small and fragile against the stark white sheets. An oxygen mask covered her nose and mouth, and the rhythmic hiss of it was the only sound in the room. Her perfectly manicured hands, the hands I remembered always adorned with elegant rings, were smudged with black soot. Seeing her like that, stripped of all her armor, all her social grace, I felt the last vestiges of my anger simply dissolve, leaving behind only a deep, aching sadness. I stood by the side of her bed, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest, a simple, miraculous sight. My father stood in the doorway, silent, just watching the two of us. After a long moment, he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "She was asking for you, right before they had to sedate her for the intubation. She kept saying your name." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a confusing mix of remorse and a plea for something I couldn't name. And in that moment, I wondered if this was the beginning of a genuine thaw, or just the first, clumsy attempt to rebuild the perfect family facade that had now quite literally gone up in smoke. I returned to work 2 days later, seeking the familiar comfort and structure of the dispatch center. The moment I walked in, my found family closed ranks around me. No one mentioned the fire directly, but their support was a tangible thing in the room. Javier silently placed a fresh, hot coffee on my console, exactly how I liked it. Chloe guarded me like a hawk, deflecting the curious questions from dispatchers on other shifts with a sharp tongue and a death glare. Brenda called me into her office and told me she had approved 2 weeks of paid administrative leave for me. I started to protest, to say I was fine, that I needed to work. She held up a hand to stop me. "Take it, Maya," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "You more than earned it. Rest. Process. We'll be here when you get back." It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order rooted in care. It was a statement of my value, not as a functionary, but as a person. I took the leave. During that time, my father started calling. The first few conversations were excruciatingly awkward. He talked about insurance adjusters, contractors, the logistics of rebuilding. He thanked me again, and then again, the words sounding stiff and unnatural in his mouth. Then one afternoon, the dam broke. "We were wrong, Maya," he said, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't identify. "About everything. We were so focused on our idea of success, we couldn't see the person standing right in front of us." He asked if I would consider coming to dinner once Eleanor was discharged from the hospital. "We want to. We need to start over." I was torn. A part of me, the wounded child that still lived deep inside, yearned for that reconciliation. But the woman I had become was wary. I talked it over with Chloe over coffee. She listened patiently, then gave me the simple, profound advice that had become her trademark. "You did your job, Maya. A job they looked down on, and it saved her life. You don't owe them anything more. Not a dinner, not a conversation. The rest is your choice, on your terms." Her words were an anchor. She was right. The power dynamic had fundamentally shifted, and it was up to me to define the new terms of engagement. I called my father back and agreed to meet them, but with a condition: not at the rubble of their old house, Not in some fancy restaurant they would choose. We would meet at a neutral, public coffee shop, my territory. When I saw them a week later, they looked different. The fire seemed to have stripped them of their imposing certainty, leaving them looking smaller, more fragile. Eleanor was pale, and her voice was still raspy. But her eyes, when they met mine, were clear and direct. She was the first to speak. "The person on the phone," she began, her hands trembling slightly as she held her teacup. She was so calm, so incredibly strong. I was so terrified. And she was this lifeline in the dark. She looked directly at me. "I didn't know it was you, not for sure, not until the very end. I think I just felt it, and all I could think, lying there on that floor, was my daughter is strong, my daughter is a hero, and I spent years calling her weak." A tear traced a path down her cheek. "I am so sorry, Maya." It was the apology I had dreamed of hearing for a decade, the one I thought would be a triumphant, vindicating moment. But sitting there, listening to her broken voice, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a quiet, melancholic peace. Richard reached across the table and put his hand over his wife's. "Your ambition. It wasn't the kind we understood," he said, his gaze fixed on me. "It was the kind that actually matters. We were fools, blinded by pride." They asked me, hesitantly, if I could find a way to be a part of their lives again, and in that moment, I had my final revelation. Their validation, which I had craved for so long, it felt like a part of my own DNA, didn't matter anymore. It was like getting a standing ovation after the theater has emptied. I had already validated myself in that dark room, with that headset on, during those 7 minutes. My worth was not, and had never been, in their hands. I took a slow sip of my coffee, feeling a sense of calm I had never known. "I can't go back to the way things were," I said, my voice steady and clear. "That family doesn't exist anymore." But I looked from my mother's hopeful face to my father's remorseful one. "I'm willing to see what we can build from here, something new, something honest." I had set my first true boundary. I wasn't their project anymore. I was the architect now. It's been a year since the fire. The relationship with my parents is a slow, ongoing construction project. It's tentative, often awkward, but it's real. We have coffee once a month. They ask about my work, not with condescension, but with a quiet, genuine respect. They are slowly, painstakingly, learning who their daughter actually is, not the person they tried to mold her into. My relationship with my found family, with Javier, Chloe, and Brenda, is stronger than ever. They are the bedrock of my life. I spent so long believing that ambition was a ladder you had to climb, in a boardroom, a title you had to acquire, a certain tax bracket you had to reach. But I learned on that stormy Tuesday night that real ambition isn't about climbing at all. It's about showing up. It's about being the calm voice in someone else's storm, the steady hand in the darkness. My family's rejection nearly broke me, but in the end it was the thing that set me free. It forced me onto a path they never would have chosen for me, and it led me to a place where my true self wasn't just accepted, it was essential. It led me home. What about you? Have you ever had a single moment, a single conversation, that changed a family dynamic forever? I want to hear about it. Share your story in the comments below. I promise you, I read every single one. Don't forget to hit that like button if my story resonated with you, and please subscribe for more stories about finding strength in the most unexpected places. Thank you so much for listening to me today. And remember, family is ultimately built on love and respect, not just blood. And sometimes, the most important call you'll ever answer is the one to save yourself.